Imagine it is the middle of a summer afternoon in Dubai. You are inside a hotel room. The thermostat reads 24 degrees. Outside, the skyline is shaking behind waves of heat. Then, something changes. The air conditioner stops. No explosion, no alarm. The lights are still on. Outside that window, the 45-degree heat hasn't stopped for a second. Sunlight is still striking the glass. Heat is bleeding through the walls. The only thing that changed is the machine fighting it. From this moment, the room is spending the cold it already has. And a countdown begins, not to structural collapse, but to a lethal trap. In a city built in the desert, a mass cooling failure isn't an inconvenience, it's a threat to survival. Now multiply that room, a hotel, an office, an entire district. What happens when a city builds its entire existence on the assumption that cooling will never fail? To answer that, you have to understand something strange. Dubai doesn't just make cold air, it stores it in advance. Because the desert isn't waiting outside. The fight has already started. A skyscraper can look like a wall between two worlds. On one side, brutal summer. On the other, controlled air. But glass and concrete are not force fields. The building envelope is part of a constant thermal battle. Dubai's own building framework includes specific requirements and calculations for glazing, insulation, thermal performance, and air conditioning equipment. Those requirements exist because the amount of heat a building allows through its exterior directly changes the cooling problem inside. Think of a room as a bucket. Cooling is constantly removing heat, but heat is constantly trying to get back in. Through glass, through walls, through roofs. Every time a door opens, every time outdoor air enters. As long as the cooling system removes that heat fast enough, the room feels completely normal. You notice nothing, and that invisibility creates the illusion that Dubai has defeated the environment. It hasn't. It has created a balance. Heat arrives. Machines remove it. Heat arrives. Machines remove it. Again and again. So when the cooling stops, the danger is not that the heat suddenly finds a way inside. The heat was already coming in. The system was simply winning faster than the environment could change the room. And there is another problem. You might think the battle becomes easier once the sun disappears, but cities do not reset at sunset. Watch Dubai just after sunset, and the psychological change is immediate. The sky darkens. The direct sun disappears. People begin moving outside again. It feels as though the worst part of the day has ended. Thermally, it is not that simple. Buildings, roofs, and other urban surfaces absorb solar energy during the day, and later release some of that stored heat. The U.S. Environmental Protection Agency notes that urban materials can build heat through the day and release it slowly after sunset. So the source changes. The sun is no longer directly attacking the glass. But the city does not instantly become cold. Cooling still has work to do. And this brings us to one of the biggest misconceptions in this entire story. If the air conditioner has been removing heat all day, where did that heat actually go? Air conditioning does not destroy heat. It moves it. That sounds obvious once you hear it, but it completely changes the way you see a cooled city. Think about a refrigerator. The inside is cold, but touch the area where the appliance rejects heat and you find the other side of the equation. Your refrigerator did not make heat vanish. It transported energy from one place to another. Air conditioning works on the same basic principle. The U.S. Department of Energy describes air conditioners as systems that transfer heat from the interior to the outside. Their cooling coils also remove heat and humidity, while the collected heat is ultimately released outdoors. Now scale that idea. One bedroom, one apartment, one office, one skyscraper, one shopping center, one district. Every cold interior has a heat rejection problem somewhere else. So when you stand inside a freezing lobby in Dubai and feel as though summer has disappeared, summer has not disappeared. Heat has been captured, transported, and rejected somewhere you probably cannot see. Dubai does not eliminate heat. It relocates it. And that matters because the outdoor environment receiving that heat is already hot. But temperature is only half of the problem. There is another enemy hiding in the air itself. You can see it with nothing more complicated than a bottle of water. Take a cold bottle outside on a humid day. Within moments, droplets begin forming on its surface. The bottle did not leak. That water came from the surrounding air. Now imagine the same basic problem at the scale of a hotel, shopping center, or tower. Outdoor air does not arrive carrying temperature alone. It can also arrive carrying moisture. That means a cooling system may have two jobs happening at the same time: lower the temperature and remove moisture. The Department of Energy specifically notes that cooling coils remove both heat and humidity from indoor air. This changes the failure scenario. If cooling weakens during humid conditions, the room does not simply become warmer. It can begin to feel heavier, stickier, less comfortable. And anyone who has walked from an aggressively air-conditioned Dubai interior into humid outdoor air understands this difference immediately. Temperature is a number you can read. Humidity is something your skin tells you, and this is where our story stops being about machinery. Because there is a much simpler way to understand how important cooling has become in Dubai. Look at the people on opposite sides of a glass door. Inside a shopping mall, summer can almost disappear. Families eat lunch, people shop, workers sit at computers, restaurants operate normally. A few meters away, outside that controlled environment, the human experience can be completely different. The UAE's occupational heat stress prevention policy prohibits covered outdoor work under direct sunlight and in open spaces from 12:30 p.m. to 3 p.m. between June 15th and September 15th each year. The current policy also provides for safe, air-conditioned rest stations for delivery workers during the midday break. That tells us something more powerful than another temperature statistic. Human behavior itself has to adapt around the summer environment. And to me, this is the simplest way to understand Dubai's cooling dependency. There are effectively two Dubais during the hardest part of summer: the natural one and the manufactured one. One exists outside the door. The other exists because machines continuously control temperature and moisture. That cold side of the door is so normal that we rarely think about how it is being created. So follow the cold backwards. Walk from the room toward the vent. From the vent into the mechanical systems. From the building down toward infrastructure most residents and visitors will never see. Because in parts of Dubai, the cold in your room may not truly begin inside your building at all. Instead of giving every building a completely isolated cooling world, district cooling can centralize part of the process. A plant chills water. Pumps move that water toward buildings. Inside those buildings, heat is transferred into the chilled water system. Warmer water returns. The cycle continues. Dubai's Regulatory and Supervisory Bureau says district cooling now supplies more than 20% of the city's cooling needs. Think about the implication. The comfortable air touching your skin may sit at the end of a chain you never see. A room depends on a building system. The building system may depend on chilled water. The water depends on pumps. The pumps depend on a cooling plant. And the plant depends on everything required to keep that chain moving. This does not mean the chain is fragile. It means cooling has become infrastructure. That distinction is critical. Because a personal luxury can be switched off, infrastructure is different. Once enough daily life depends on it, losing it changes what the city can comfortably do. And Dubai has pushed this logic even further. Because some plants do something that sounds almost absurd when you first hear it. They prepare cold before the city needs it. Dubai's cooling regulations require thermal energy storage in large cooling plants specifically to help reduce peak electricity demand. Forget the technical details for a moment. The concept is what matters. Create cooling capacity earlier. Store it. Use it when demand becomes harder to manage. It is a little like filling a reservoir before everyone turns on the tap. Except what is being prepared is thermal capacity. Cold is being saved for later. And that reveals something important about the scale of the summer problem. Dubai does not merely react when the hottest hours arrive. Parts of its cooling infrastructure prepare for those hours before they happen. Which raises the next question. What is the one dependency sitting behind the chillers, pumps, fans, controls, and much of the equipment we have just followed? Now electricity finally enters the story. Cooling is not a minor electricity user in Dubai. The Regulatory and Supervisory Bureau describes cooling as essential to life in Dubai and says it represents almost half of the Emirates' total electricity demand. DEWA identifies noon to 6 p.m. as summer peak load hours and advises customers to reduce unnecessary high-consumption use during that period. Notice the collision. The hours when the external environment is hardest to escape are also the hours when energy demand becomes particularly important. But this is not a story claiming Dubai is about to run out of electricity. That would miss the deeper problem. Electricity is not the villain. It is the thread holding many of these cooling layers together. Chillers need energy. Pumps need energy. Fans need energy. Controls need energy. The system keeping humidity and temperature inside a controlled range needs energy. And as Dubai grows, that obligation does not end when construction finishes. A completed building creates a new permanent question. How do you keep this volume of space comfortable every summer from now on? This is where Dubai's enormous wealth creates a strange paradox. Dubai can spend money on the problem. Better glass, better insulation, more efficient chillers, larger cooling networks, thermal storage, more electrical infrastructure. And those solutions matter. But notice what none of them changes. The temperature outside. In 2025, NCM reported a temperature of 49.8 degrees Celsius at Sai Al Salem in Dubai, close enough to 50 degrees to make the title of this problem more than a metaphor. At the same time, DEWA reported that Dubai's peak electricity demand rose 5.8% in 2025 to 11,391 megawatts as demand for electricity, water, and cooling services continued to grow. Do not read those numbers as evidence that Dubai has failed. Read them as evidence of the race. Build another tower, and you create another tower that must remain usable through summer. Build another hotel, and you create another indoor climate that guests expect to remain stable. Build another shopping center, and you create another enormous volume of air that cannot simply be allowed to drift toward outdoor conditions. That is the paradox. Every time Dubai wins more territory from the heat, it creates more territory it must continue defending. Money can buy another layer of defense, but money cannot make cooling optional. And almost all the time, this problem is completely invisible. Because almost all the time, the system works. Walk through Dubai on an ordinary summer day, and this entire battle disappears. A hotel lobby feels comfortable. The supermarket is cold. The office is normal. The mall is busy. A door opens. Cold air hits your face. Nobody stops to think about the cooling plant. Nobody imagines chilled water moving through pipes. Nobody wonders where the rejected heat went. Infrastructure has a strange quality. When it works perfectly, it becomes invisible. Glass slows the heat. Cooling removes what gets through. Moisture is controlled. Water moves. Pumps run. Electricity remains available. The indoor climate simply exists. And that creates a powerful sense of security. So now return to the room where we began. The thermostat reads 24 degrees. The city outside is brutally hot. And once again, the cooling stops. This time, we know what is happening. This is a scenario for understanding dependency. It is not a prediction that Dubai's cooling system is about to collapse. But imagine one building temporarily losing effective cooling during an extreme summer afternoon. At first, the most disturbing thing is how ordinary everything looks. The air is still cold. The furniture is still cool. The walls have not suddenly become hot. Guests may continue talking. Someone may continue watching television. A worker may not immediately realize anything has changed. The building has thermal momentum. It still possesses the environment created moments earlier. It is living on borrowed cold. But the balance has changed. Outside, the sun continues striking the building. Heat continues moving through the envelope. Every door that opens creates another exchange with outdoor conditions. People inside continue releasing body heat. Lights, computers, kitchen equipment, and other machines continue adding heat to indoor spaces. Moisture still has to be controlled. Before, the cooling system was continuously carrying part of that burden away. Now imagine that removal becoming much weaker. The outside world does not need to smash through the windows. Nothing dramatic has to happen. The indoor climate simply begins moving in the wrong direction. Slowly, quietly. Comfort goes first. Someone notices the room feels warmer. Another person lowers the thermostat. Nothing changes. Then the air begins feeling different. In humid conditions, moisture control matters too. The building that felt sealed away from summer begins feeling less separate from it. Now expand the scenario. One hotel room becoming uncomfortable is irritating. An entire floor changes operations. A larger building losing temperature control creates different stakes. Restaurants care about temperature. Food storage cares about temperature. Offices contain people and heat-producing equipment. Retail environments were designed around controlled indoor conditions. Certain technical and healthcare environments can have far more demanding climate control requirements. The longer control is lost, the more ordinary activities have to adapt. And that is the key point. The building does not have to physically collapse for its relationship with the city to change. The tower can still be standing perfectly straight. Its windows can still be intact. The lights may still be visible. From outside, the skyline can look exactly the same. Yet the thing people actually occupy the indoor environment is becoming less different from the climate the building was constructed to resist. That is a very different kind of disaster. There is no cinematic explosion. No skyscraper falling into the street. No giant crack splitting across the facade. Instead, the boundary fails quietly. The building simply loses the ability to maintain the conditions everyone inside assumed were permanent. And suddenly the luxury room is no longer fighting summer successfully. The supermarket is no longer separated from the same thermal environment outside its doors. The office begins becoming a place people may no longer want to remain. Every minute that controlled cooling is unavailable makes the outside climate more relevant. This is why the most frightening image in this entire video is not a dark skyline. It is much simpler. A perfectly normal room becoming warmer while the air conditioner stays silent. Because the catastrophe is not the desert breaking into Dubai. It is Dubai losing the ability to keep the desert out. And yet there is an obvious objection. Dubai knows it is hot. Engineers know cooling matters. The city has spent decades building systems specifically designed to deal with this environment. So hasn't Dubai already solved the problem? In many ways, yes. And that leads directly to the final trap. Dubai does not treat cooling as an afterthought. Its building framework addresses glazing, insulation, and air conditioning requirements. Its district cooling regulator requires thermal storage at large plants to reduce peak electricity demand. Its electricity authority actively identifies summer peak load periods. These are not signs of a city ignoring its climate. They are signs of a city adapting to it. And most of the time, those adaptations work so well that the threat disappears from view, which sounds reassuring, until you realize what successful cooling has allowed Dubai to do. Go back to the door from the beginning. Outside, summer. Inside, 24 degrees. At first, that door looked like the boundary between Dubai and the desert, but it was never the real boundary. The real boundary was everything behind it. The glass, the insulation, the cooling coils, the chilled water, the pumps, the storage, the controls, the electricity. Layer after layer of systems working together so well that the person opening the door never needs to think about them. And that is the final reversal. Dubai is not trapped because its cooling system does not work. Dubai is trapped because it works so well. It works well enough to build towers whose occupants expect the hottest afternoon to feel ordinary. It works well enough for enormous shopping centers to operate through summer. It works well enough for indoor life to continue, while outdoor work has to be reorganized around heat exposure. It works well enough for cold air to stop feeling like infrastructure and start feeling like a permanent feature of the city. And the more successful that system becomes, the more Dubai can build on top of one assumption: we will always be able to keep the heat outside. That is where wealth stops solving the trap. Money can buy better glass. Money can buy another chiller, another cooling plant, another pipe, another power project, another layer between people and summer. But money cannot change the basic requirement behind all of them. Tomorrow, the cooling has to work again, and the day after that, and the next summer. And every new cooled building adds another place where losing that ability matters. Dubai has not defeated extreme heat. It has built one of the most elaborate ways imaginable to live beside it without constantly feeling it. And that may be the most unsettling part. Because when a system becomes this successful, people stop seeing it as a defense. They see it as normal life. Until the hum stops. The room is still cold. The lights are still on. Nothing looks wrong. But the countdown has already begun. Dubai's real 50-degree survival trap is not simply the heat outside. It is how much of the city now depends on never having to feel it.